Hello, and welcome to the Fairy Tale Unit. This story today is Beauty and the Beast. Again, think of these things. What are the things each fairy tale could be trying to tell you about the society it's written for? How does each fairy tale react to the supernatural? How does it treat men, women? How is it different depending on where it's written, or the same? How are the movie clips, poems, and articles related to each story? The Beauty and the Beast clips begin at 28 and go to 32. So there's a bit more there. Beauty and the Beast, again, is a French fairy tale. I talked about it a little bit in the fairy tale unit itself, so it's kind of familiar, so I'm not going to rehash all of that. So I'm just going to give you the Cav version of the story. Here we go. Once upon a time, there was a rich merchant. He has 3 daughters. They had a lot of money, and then they had ships, and then there was a storm, and the ship sank, except for one, which kind of limped back and was like, hey, we lost all our boats. And so the merchant lost all of his money. He had to give up his nice house in the city and move to the country. While he was there, his oldest daughters did not do well living in the country. They were really unhappy. They missed their fancy stuff. They missed having nice things. And they made their youngest sister, Beauty, do all of the work, which was fine. She didn't mind because she was nice. So then one day they got news that one of the other boats had come back, and it actually had some stuff. So the father had to go back and kind of get that sorted. So he asks his daughters, like, what can I bring you? And his daughters are like, diamonds, please. Emeralds, please. And Beauty's like, I would like a rose because they're expensive and we don't grow them. And so he goes back to the city and he gets everything sorted, kind of sells all the inventory, gets everything organized, and then gets a couple diamonds, gets a couple emeralds, but he can't find any roses because they're not in season. Stupid Beauty. So he's on his way back home, and he gets caught in a blizzard, and he finds himself in a part of the forest that he doesn't know, and there's this big castle, and the castle, no one lives there, but things keep happening, like doors keep opening, food just keeps appearing, and he's like, this is real weird. I don't know how I feel about this. But he says thank you because someone is obviously taking care of him and like making sure his horse is okay. And he's like, well, thank you. This is very kind of you. I appreciate it. So it's morning and he's headed off. He's on his way home. He's having a good day. And then he sees this bunch of roses. And he's like, oh my gosh, a rose. I need to pick one for Beauty. So he picks a rose and all of a sudden this beast pops up and he's like, hey, I gave you food and shelter and now you're stealing my plant life. Dude, breach of etiquette. Tangent. A big thing in ancient cultures was the hospitality rule. Basically, the idea was you always entertained strangers in your house because you never knew if it was like a saint or a king or Jesus in disguise. So you always let strangers in. So it was a big covenant. If you were wandering around, you knew that you could go to anyone's house. And if you were a person, you knew you could let anyone into your house because if someone killed you, that was a breach of that hospitality rule. So in Beauty and the Beast, in the movies, when the beast doesn't let the enchantress in, he's breaking that ancient covenant, and he gets punished for it, as the society would say, is proper. So basically, Maurice is now stealing from his host, so he's breaking that covenant as well. Not as strongly, but still, there's some fracture there. Okay, back to the story. So Maurice is like, oh gosh, the dad's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. My youngest daughter wanted a rose. I wasn't thinking. Take it back. And the beast's like, no. I know that I'm a scary buffalo man monster, but I should really kill you for this, but I won't. As long as your youngest daughter agrees to come and live with me forever. And the guy's like, I can't let my daughter come live here. Why would I do that? And he's like, hey, it's either your daughter living with me, or your life. And he's like, okay, well, can I go home and see my kids and tell them goodbye and then I'll come back? And he's like, yeah, sure. Either you come back or your daughter comes back. Either way's good with me. And the dad's like, okay. So he goes home and he gives his daughters their stuff and he says, and I'm also going to say goodbye because of this rose. And so he tells the story and Beauty's like, that's not going to happen. And he's like, what do you mean? Of course I'm not letting you go back. And she's like, yes, you are. And he says, no, I'm not. And she says, okay, we'll talk about it in the morning. And while everyone's asleep, she sneaks out and finds her way to the castle. And the beast is like, so you came? And she's like, yes, I did. And I'm not happy about it because she threatened to kill my father. What was I supposed to do? Let him die? And he's like, yeah, exactly. That's why I picked you. And she's like, "Hmm." So she's got a nice house, and she's working with the enchanted furniture, and she's all right. She's doing fine. And then one day, the beast is like, "Oh, well, by the way, dinner is at this time. You know, it's fine. Just come down for dinner." She's like, "Okay." She's a little nervous because she doesn't know why the beast wants her there, but she knows she feels pretty comfortable at the castle despite the fact that it's magic, and she's afraid she's going to get eaten. But it turns out the beast is like, "No, the castle is your home. You can go anywhere. Please don't go into my room because it's messy." She's like, "Done." Okay. And then he's like, "Also, at night, I want you to stay in your room because I'm a beast and I can't always act pretty because I'm a beast and I eat things like deer." And she's like, "Oh, good to know. Thanks for the heads up." And then they have dinner, and he's like, "Also, will you marry me?" And she's like, "Nope." And he's like, "Okay, good night." But he's a little sad when he says it, so it's more like, "Okay, good night." And so this goes on for a while. Beauty has her day, and she goes and she reads and she explores the castle and the gardens, and she has a great time. But every night at dinner, the beast asks her to marry him. And every night she says no. Then one day she's looking a little blue. It's been months. And the beast's like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "Well, I really miss my family." And he's like, "Well, okay, I'll let you go home and visit your family, but I have a condition. You can only stay for a week, because if you're gone for longer than that, I'm just going to die." And she's like, "Whoa, dramatic much." She says, "Okay." And he said, "But don't, your sisters are going to try to talk you into staying longer. Don't let them." And she's like, "Okay." So she goes home. And she's there for a week, and everyone's so excited to see her not dead. And her dad's like, "How dare you run off?" And she's like, "Saved your life." But in a much politer way, because she's a woman in, 1800s France, 1600s France. So, like, no sass there. Eye roll. So her sisters are like, "You should stay longer." And despite her promise to the beast, she does get convinced to stay a little bit longer. But then one day she has a dream. The beast is in the gardens, and he's like slumped over, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I killed him." So she runs back, and she's like, "Beast, are you all right?" And he's like, "Well, I was dying from sadness, but I'm okay now because you're back." And she says, "Oh, thank goodness." And she said, "Also, I've been thinking, I will marry you." And he's like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and we have good conversations when you're not asking me to marry you," because they do run into each other occasionally. It's not really clear in the story, but they have good conversations, and that's the only awkward part of her life, is that this guy that she really enjoys spending time with keeps proposing. She's like, "We have a good time talking, and you're really very nice. You're just kind of funny looking. So, like, I can make that work." And just that moment, he turns into a handsome prince, and he's like, You've freed me from my spell, because all I needed was for someone to promise to marry me, despite my outward appearance." And then this fairy pops up, and she's like, "Oh, Beauty, your kindness, your wonderfulness. Now you get a man who is kind and attractive and smart." And Beauty's like, "Oh, that's what I get for being the best." So then they have a wedding party, and she invites all of her family, and her dad's like, "Oh, cool, this worked out well." And her sisters are like, "Oh, man, now Beauty gets to be a princess," without remembering that they are in pre-Revolutionary War France. I'm assuming they run away to some other country and don't die. And that's the fairy tale, Beauty and the Beast. Remember, this fairy tale was written to convince young ladies that it doesn't matter if your husband is a craggy old wrinkly man. You can make him better. A heart of a prince beats in every grumpy person. The fairy tale is actually a lot more Stockholm Syndrome-y than the actual Disney movie. All right. Have a wonderful day. Wash your hands. Cav out.